Okay, so I'm going to get started because we have a kind of I try to keep to our time commitment, and I want to welcome everybody. I'm not going to go into individual introductions because that just takes too long. I apologize for that. But so we're gonna get rolling here, and I'd just like to introduce Tom. He's a CCL volunteer, retired nuclear engineer, worked for 26 years in many facets of the industry, and that includes operations, design, and licensing. Then he spent a couple of decades in his second career in nuclear healthcare as a radiation safety officer, and he's going to probably give you a better background within his presentation, so you get a better idea. But let's just say he knows his stuff. Um,
I used to.
he's well, we're counting on it. You can bluff us, really, honestly. No, but he's active in the Naperville, Illinois chapter and has presented on this topic to a wide variety of audiences. So, um, Tom, you want to?
Yeah, I'll grab it. Let's do it. Can everybody see that?
Not yet. There you go.
All right. Well, thanks for this opportunity. What, we got 17 so far? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, Trying to page through real quick, see if I recognize anybody. The more the better. I recognize Larry Howe, and a couple other ones. Yeah, you did a pretty good job of talking about my experience. I did get it. I
Oh,
did have
excuse me, Tom. Let me just say one thing. If everybody could mute themselves, because my dog just barked, and so if you can mute yourself so we don't have any background.
All right. Yeah, I was fortunate in my 26 plus years directly in the nuclear industry to work at all different levels, including on site at Dresden Nuclear Power Station. That's a General Electric boiling water reactor in operations, and I actually got to design fuel, and I got involved high level waste, and I got involved as an industry group chair for several years on several safety issues, and I even met some people from Chernobyl. So, and my second career is a long story. There's no other than to say I did it for health reasons. I like both my careers, and I'm a big fan of CCL. I wish we could do carbon fee and dividend, and I have no affiliations with anybody else. Just a quick, well, you got like Mike's muted. Anybody public acceptance? I can't see most of you. I guess I could see hands up. I'll just assume you think it's say about the same or it's gotten better. Um, the Advance Act, which CCL helps support, especially through the conservative side of CCL, passed in a ridiculously bipartisan matter, and that was a purely advancing nuclear act, trying to really the equivalent of permitting reform, and kind of trying to set up the Nuclear Regulatory Commission or the NRC. You'll be hearing that acronym a lot, setting the NRC up for success for being able to process more licensing applications. So, and I assume you can't quite see the stuff on the right. Is that true? Is that screen cut off partly? Okay.
You can see up to the Dem Republican
Okay. Yeah.
difference.
There's nothing I can do to change that. I guess not. Um, but basically, it's one of the more bipartisan forms of clean energy in the United States, and there's less divide on nuclear than almost anything else, and that's good. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. Um, just briefly, there's 94 operating reactors left, um, about 96 gigawatts total. I'm not sure if people are familiar with gigawatts, but a gigawatt scale reactor runs can do almost all the needs of a city, somewhere between a 500,000 and 1 million in terms of the housing needs. And they were getting old, about 43 years old, the average, and on the order of about 10 reactors have shut down. I should remember that exact number. And we're looking at bringing some back, and more on that later. Um, yeah, the electric growth has been flat in the past. If you could look, if I was able to see the right side of the screen, maybe if I change my screen, you'll be able to see that. Now, can you see that on the right?
Yeah.
Tom, I think we can see it. I'm not sure
Oh
why.
yeah, I stopped looking at you guys. Now you can see it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and the it's been flat. When you look out, this is all the way out to 2023. You know, the low growth curve on the top of the screen has been pretty flat. I think I got a pointer. I had a pointer. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, yeah, there's my cursor. Right, let me go back. And nuclear has been a kind of a solid 18-20% of our generation really for quite some time now. And you can see over time, coal has been dropping off radically, and natural gas has been picking up the slack, along with renewables. And renewables that includes hydropower and geothermal. So wind and solar are still behind nuclear generation output, even with all the big push recently. So I've really got four major reasons why we need more why nuclear is such a big deal now, and they really come into I'm really emphasizing the things that I see a lot of non-governmental organizations just getting wrong, and I hate to say it, but it's really been holding one of the big reasons holding nuclear back. So I'll start with we need more power. We need more reliable power. This goes back a year, and I'm doing that on purpose. Just a little over a year ago, all of a sudden, electricity demand is spiking. I think most of you probably know why. The data centers and artificial intelligence seem to cause a big change in that, in everybody's forecast. And you go back again a year ago, and the forecast for 2028 was 38 gigawatts of growth in demand. That is massive. I'll give you a little perspective on that in a second. And then all of a sudden, December, just a month and a half ago, the forecast was double that or triple that. It's crazy. And all my slides are available to everybody. If we can make them available at the end, you can put it in the chat, the link to it, and everything has a link on it if you want to look at it for yourself. But it's really a shocking increase. And the question is, can the grid keep up? So what does 38 gigawatts look like? I started with a small number just in case, just to be conservative. It's about 75 to 100 full-size gas power plants, 100 coal units, 32 fairly large nuclear units, maybe 25 supersized nuclear units like the latest ones, uh, uh, over 100 small nuclear reactors. We'll talk about those, small modular reactors. We'll talk about those a lot. And greater than twice the capacity of every battery in the country at the end of 2023. And that was for a couple hours of that electricity. So if you wanted to start thinking about storing electricity to make up for all the new power demand we have, you start up to talking about 3 orders of magnitude versus what we had in 2023. And that's a ridiculous expense. I'm not talking about 3 times, 3 orders of magnitude. The second big reason on why we need nuclear now is the obvious one. Wind and solar are variable, and we need some reliable firm power. I've got some spectacular references on this. Finally, they were hard to come by. Here's just one example. This is the PJM grid. For those of you who are familiar with that, that's really northern Illinois and most of the states east
Yeah, I got
of
it.
the coast.
Everybody in the room.
Your audio's on.
Is something okay? Something wrong?
No, go ahead. Just everybody mute if you're not on.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks. And this is just an example of through the day. This is like the average demand for a given year in 2023 of the whole giant grid. On the right is the size here of the amount of demand. We're talking about 100,000 gigawatts or 100,000 megawatts. So that'd be equivalent of roughly 100 full-size nuclear units. And some of the times when the demand is the highest here, if you can see my cursor, the renewable output is the lowest, and that's awful. And of course, we don't have the solar generation up north like you do down in Texas. But you go through the same type of things on cloudy days and cold days. And there's the famous ERCOT Texas winter of 2021, where the power grid sort of failed. The You can see on the bottom here, wind is in the red, solar is in the yellow, and the power they wish they had was up on top of here, like looks like a mountain range in white, and they didn't have it. And there's failures in natural gas, there was failures in coal, and there were trivial failures in the renewables. But the bottom line is you just don't have them every time you want them. And a lot of so many well-intentioned green groups just ignore this concept and think, well, we can store the excess. Well, you'll see in a little bit how hard that is to do. I like this one. This is what the nuclear industry likes to tout, is that the capacity factor, or how much of the time, what percentage of the time are you getting your full power? And some of that's not fair because nuclear plants are intentionally run almost full power for economic reasons. But to compare it to wind, that's a really good number. That means a third of the time you're getting your wind output, and in solar nationwide, it's roughly a quarter of the time. But that's because the major solar installations, the grid scale, are in the south and in the west. And Northern Illinois, if we were to try to do it on solar, we're talking 10 to 15% capacity factor. Houston, a lot of you from down there, 17%. I think a lot of people don't realize that to equal a full power capability, you need, just to start with, you need 4 times as much solar in a good part of the country and 3 times as much wind on average, just to start. Then you need somehow to connect it and have it sitting there and available as stored energy. What was I trying to do in this one? Oh yeah, when you look at the actual output of all the wind and solar in the country in 2020, end of 2023, and you compare it to nuclear, it was 3.5x. So in terms of per rated capacity, nuclear was 3.5 times more. And that's just a reflection of the previous slide. All right. So let's get into more specifics on what happens if you try to run a grid without something like nuclear. And what I'm going to show in the next couple of slides is that without firm power is defined below, it's just too expensive. And nobody's done it other than in really unusual grids with a lot of hydropower, for example, like in South America. And by clean firm power, I mean hydroelectric, nuclear, gas with carbon capture and sequestration, or geothermal electric, not geothermal heating and air conditioning. And this is my favorite resource. UCCLers are going to recognize this name, Jesse Jenkins. He's the Princeton author of the grid study that we've referenced heavily in our lobbying, showing we've got to get transmission going, or we're not going to get anywhere. And he made a report in the state of California. This was a couple of years ago, and there were 3 big time what's the right word for it? Think tanks that got involved in this. I think the other ones were the Clean Air Task Force and Stanford University. It was funded by an Environmental Defense Fund. And their conclusion was, without clean, firm power, if you try to do it in solar and wind, forget about it. These wholesale prices range from around 9 cents a kilowatt hour to 15 cents a kilowatt hour if you try to go the other route. And somehow you have to build it. That's the problem. You'd have to add 25 to 40 gigawatts of clean firm power, and the prohibitive cost, even like I said, the cost is only maybe 50, 60% more expensive, but you just can't do it. You need massive amount of land use, massive amount of storage, massive amount of transmission hookups without more nuclear, geothermal, or gas with sequestration. So this is a great study. It was so good that the Department of Energy, they've been writing on every form of energy we have in terms of making a cleaner grid to address climate change. They have what's called a pathway to commercial liftoff. And for advanced nuclear power, they referenced this exact study I just showed you, and they said this is what the costs look like if you try to do the California grid with renewables and storage only on the left, or if you added nuclear on the right. It's about 37% cheaper to add nuclear. And I'd like to point out that California is already heavily favored to go full on renewable compared to most of the country because they have hydroelectric power, a lot of it. They have 2 very large nuclear units, and they have geothermal energy, quite a bit of that also. And had they not had those resources, this price differential would be much, much higher. And much to my surprise and delight, the state of New York just did a study released last month, actually a few weeks ago. And their conclusion for the state of New York, identical to the California conclusion. Unbelievable. They identified a critical need to go to zero emissions in New York, and both New York and the state of New York and California are quite serious about going clean. You need clean electricity technology that's reliable and meets the demand for power when wind and solar are less variable. They call them dispatchable emission-free resources. And they say you need 20 to 40 gigawatts. That's 15 to 35 full-size nuclear units or more decarbonized firm resources by 2050. New York has a history of shutting down nuclear plants, just like California did, and they've been successful at it, just like California was, but they still have 4 units left, providing about 20% of the state's generation, whereas California only has 2 left, providing about 10%. So even 2 units, as big as California is, 2 units is still providing a huge chunk of California's grid. All right, well, my last big reason why we need nuclear now, seasonal storage. Everybody thinks we've got batteries that are getting cheaper by the day. We're all set. All we got to do is take excess wind and solar, put it in a battery, and we're good to go. Batteries too expensive? All right, put it in something else. And they're cheap and they're easy, right? Wrong. They're not cheap. They're not easy. You need long duration storage, and we have very few of them. And you'll see on the next slide. And long duration storage have major cost issues and environmental barriers. Another pathway to report from the Department of Energy. I love what they're doing. I hope they keep up the spectacular work that was going on in DOE. I think they have about 15 of these reports. You name the form of energy generation and carbon capture, and they're covered it. Solar, wind. And this one's on long duration energy storage. The report's only about a year old. If you look left to right on this slide, they're talking about the type of storage that makes sense economically and physically using today's technologies, even looking towards future technologies. They're saying battery storage systems are good for hours and maybe a day or two, maybe. And on the right side here, they kind of summarize it again. Inter-day storage and multi-day storage, you're starting to get the focus of this report, and you're talking about really different stuff, primarily things like pumped hydro, which I don't have time to talk about a lot, but basically it's like having a small lake at high elevation and a small lake at low elevation. They can be closed, they can be underground, they can be above ground, one can be on a hill, one can be down below, one can be a lake, and one can be a river, and you name it, and you pump the water up and down. Great return. You get about 75% of your energy back, but the cost to make these things gets on the order of the same cost as building a nuclear plant. You need, if you want a gigawatt scale, you need gigadollars to do it. And if you're doing it for a couple days or a week, they're being done now. We have a lot of these in the country, very successful. There's a huge one in Ludington, Michigan, on a bluff in Lake Michigan, and they use Lake Michigan water. They pump it up and they run it down through turbines, and they use it for minimizing the need for more generation during peak hours of the day. They do all the pumping at night or off peak, and they can even go like a week or two with that. But beyond that, for seasonal duration storage, it's a pipe dream. It'd be hard to convince you of that in just this sort of time, but there is no such thing right now other than maybe creating hydrogen or creating some other form of fuel, chemical storage of some sort. You can get creative with heat and store it long periods of time, but you have to have a heat source to do that. Finland is doing that right now with solar energy and wind and nuclear. During the summer, they're creating giant heat storage for heating, for civilian and commercial heating sources for the winter sources. They're basically doing seasonal storage mechanically as energy, pure heat. But they have an entire different infrastructure for heating than we do in Europe. They already do a lot of shared heat modes. So let's stay back on nuclear. I'm just repeating the first one. You have to remember that having enough wind and solar to meet the demand, you have to be able to last days, sometimes weeks, and maybe even months. So if you want to go a full clean grid, you need reliable, firm generation of something. And nuclear fits the bill. Now let's get into more fun stuff. How often have you seen what I've just been talking about? Wind and solar and storage can do it all. You don't need nuclear. Well, this is one of my favorite anti-nuclear groups because they're headquartered in Chicago. Nuclear Energy Information Service. It's misinformation service. They're really saying, renewable energy is already cheaper and it already exists. You don't need nuclear and all the waste except to go with it. Sierra Club, another one of my favorites. Every dollar spent on nuclear is a wasted dollar. And Greenpeace, of course. And if you Google this, you'll find about 100 legitimate non-governmental organizations all saying the same thing. And to my dismay, you'll also see things like on the left. That's a 2024 report, and they're quoting Environmental Protection Agency. I don't care what side of the coin you're on, EPA does a great amount of good. There are still people in every governmental organization that don't get the message, and they have their own little turf. And they got mad at Tennessee Valley Authority for replacing a coal plant with natural gas. And the EPA said they didn't adequately look at the need for that you could have gone around this with wind and solar. No, TVA did look at it, and TVA had a good reason. Had massive blackouts in Christmas 2022. They had everything running that they could get. They were importing nuclear power from Illinois, from the units that I used to work with, and it wasn't enough. And TVA people knew darn well that you can't just replace firm generation. Yes, coal is still firm generation with wind and solar and storage. And this is my favorite part. Starting about a year ago, you started seeing news like this. Not even a year ago. Constellation Energy, that's the biggest nuclear owners in the company. They took over Exelon, which is a company I retired from. We're looking at nuclear power for data centers. Tennessee Valley Authority says, we're going to work on one of the sites where we got a reactor going. We're going to look at small modular reactors. And then all of a sudden, Constellation says, we're talking about restarting 3 Mile Island, the one that did not have the accident. Palisades nuclear plant on the shores of Lake Michigan in Michigan. We're going to do the same thing. Duane Arnold in the state of Iowa, the only nuclear reactor in the state of Iowa, a half power size one. We want to do it too. And Microsoft signs a power purchase agreement with Constellation Energy for 3 Mile Island restart, and they're going to do it. This one I really like because they can do it without any loan guarantees, which are up in the air right now with the new Trump administration. All funding is kind of up in the air. Hopefully that'll clear soon. They have a 20-year purchase power agreement. It's 835 megawatts, almost a gigawatt. They intend to do it by 2028. I met in Zoom on a small meeting. I got to meet the plant manager and the licensing engineer as a member of American Nuclear Society. This was only a month ago. And the word I just got is they're ahead of schedule. They expect to create 3,400 direct and indirect jobs and add about 16 billion to Pennsylvania's GDP. And they also signed a deal with the U.S. government back in January. And I think this one still is still solid to supply the U.S. government buildings with nuclear power. This is again a power purchase agreement. And Texas, one of my favorite states, because they can make things happen. They had a blue ribbon committee create a report over a couple of years and said basically the conclusion of the report was that nuclear makes a lot of sense in Texas. This just came out in November. And again, back to Tennessee Valley Authority, they're actually working on with General Electric, Hitachi, to do small modular reactors in Tennessee. And I noted this because this was just this year. And another one, New York, is getting more serious. And who else have we got? And a floating nuclear power plant. So here we are, I'm up to date by only off by a couple of weeks. I could make more of these. I went 20 years and I couldn't have shown you anything like this. So that's how much has just changed inside a year. Floating nuclear power plants, you bring them on barges. The shipping, the manufacturing can be done in shipyard scale facilities. Makes a lot of sense. And they're serious. And these things, once you start talking factories, you can build quickly. Oh, another one, Arizona is looking at a joint effort. And the number of states that are doing something, at least something, it's up around 1 or 2 dozen, including Kentucky, Ohio, Utah, Wyoming. It's hard to keep track of them all. So let's go back to a little more direct nuclear things. And now in about 5 minutes, we can start letting you see what areas you're interested in, because I've got a lot of slides covering just about everything. I'll hit these one at a time. This is World in Data. Anybody of you heard of Hannah Ritchie? She's one of the senior data analysts in the UK. This is considered one of the most definitive sources of information that you can trust. The death rate from accidents and air pollution, coal is clearly the worst. You're talking about this, if you put it in scale, this is per population of about 150,000 people. And this was in the EU, but it's really no different here. So you're talking about 25 asthma and cancer-related deaths associated with coal effluents per year per 150,000 people. That's how bad it is. Nuclear, you're talking about 0.03, solar 0.02. And if you took Chernobyl out of the equation, nuclear would be 0.0000. There would be no deaths associated with commercial nuclear power, other than one maybe from the accident in Japan. There's that big a difference. What about greenhouse gas emissions? These are life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. Not just they can take into account all the concrete it takes to build these units. And again, coal is clearly the worst. Oil is way up there as bad. Natural gas is no beauty either, but that's primarily because of 2 things: nitrous oxides, which create smog, air pollution, and also cause air pollution deaths. And of course, greenhouse gases. The greenhouse gases directly 440 tons. Again, nuclear is the winner on this one at 6 tons per what is their terawatt hour, which is a unit I can't quite get around, other than it's 150,000 people annually. It's even better than solar. So. And another nuclear advantage is the footprint. This is one of my favorite slides. There's a little speck on the slide over there. That's how much land it creates to make the equivalent amount of energy of all these other ones moving to your right: natural gas, hydroelectric, coal, biomass, that would be trees, and wind. That's counting the spacing. Ground-mounted solar voltaic. It's a lot of land. And that's another perspective on the right to show you relative size of a nuclear plant versus solar versus wind. And I don't believe that's taking into account the capacity factors either. That's just capacity. And here's another fun fact. Right now, 80% of our coal plants right now are ready to go, pretty much ready to turn into what we call a brownfield nuclear site. Brownfield means it's already been licensed for something that has hazardous material on it. And you can kind of look at that slide. There's massive economic impact, way more jobs, nuclear versus coal. It's probably 10 to 1. And you're leveraging your existing infrastructure. And my favorite one there is, I don't even know if this slide shows it. I stole it from DOE. The grid. You don't need to change. You don't need to hook it up. The hookup's there, and so is the cooling water. And you also could do it at existing nuclear plants. You could almost do the whole shot of what it was Biden's goal, which was to double what the existing amount, to actually go to triple the amount we've got now by 2050. You could do it at existing sites, many of which were sized for multiple reactors that never got built. And a couple more slides, and then I'll open up to questions. Right now, you'll hear about generations of nuclear reactors. Right now, pretty much the whole country is built around generation 2 and generation 3. Those were reactors designed in the late 60s and 70s. And the generation 3 and 3 plus, I would say the new units in Georgia, they're called Vogtle, units 3 and 4. They're considered 3 plus. And what's the big difference with the advanced ones? Is the generation 3 and 3 plus, and really we pretty much have no generation 3s. Other countries do. It's the advantages that they use passive safety, and they're really almost operator free need for reaction. Little or no reliance on external power and cooling. Whereas the vast majority of existing reactors require numbers of trains of power sources, numbers of trains. I'm calling them trains because they are trains. Like one train might be 3 sets of pumps, any one of which could work. Another train would be 3 sets of backup pumps, only they're using a different method. Maybe they're spraying instead of pumping. And another train that's doing something else. So there's a lot of defense in depth in the old reactors, and the newest designs are passive. They use gravity and natural circulation, like a big tank for emergency, stored above the reactor, where you just let it drain as needed. The things that happened in Japan, it was really a loss of offsite power, a loss of ability to run these cooling pumps that caused the meltdowns that did happen. Had they had this kind of design, or if they had just followed the standard rules that the Western world was doing at the time, it wouldn't have happened. Quick side note, I was a licensing engineer in the early 1980s, and my name is on documents saying why Dresden units 2 and 3 and Quad Cities units 1 and 2 could not have an incident such as what happened in Japan. There is no worst case flooding, tornado, or other sort of incident, tsunami, etc., that could cause complete loss of generation. We thought about it in the 80s. Japan knew about it, but they said, well, the odds of a tsunami that big were really low, and they didn't act on it. Shouldn't have happened. And my favorite part of this slide is to the right, generation 4 reactors. These are what you hear as small modular reactors. They're inherently safe. They run much higher temperatures, but very low pressures. So you don't have a pipe with a lot of force on it that could possibly break or rupture. And they can be built smaller and modular, and they use all kinds of tricky stuff. And we go about that. They run all different sizes, small, medium, and large. Large is really for small modular reactors. I think we're talking about micro and up to about 300 megawatts. So about a quarter of the size of a full power reactor. There's a lot of projects underway, and I want to open up for questions. So I'm not going to talk about all these, but all these in red have some sort of funding. Most of that money's out the door. And in green are more private ones going on. And around the world, there's a lot. TerraPower in Wyoming, you probably heard about this one. This is one that Bill Gates is involved in. They're using liquid sodium as a coolant and really cool salt tanks to store about a third of that power and have it available during the day. So instead of being 350 megawatts, they could be 500 megawatts for part of the day. It's a liquid sodium cooled, again, low pressure, and there's all kinds of technical challenges, but we've faced these before. Oak Ridge is doing a modular, low pressure, high temperature, salt cooled reactor. This is using my favorite type of fuel. I've got to show you this one. You see these little particles here? They're about the size of a poppy seed, maybe a little bigger. That's the containment. That's the nuclear containment. Triple layers, if you look on the left of the slide, that's blowing one of these little things up. All the fission products stay inside there, and the various layers are a combination of porous and firm material that allows swelling, fission product gases to be absorbed and not penetrate. And then even cooler yet, they put all these inside of a ball, about the size of a cue ball or tennis ball, or a little smaller. That's the next containment level. And then you run these through the reactor. It's awesome. It's called triso fuel. And there's one more example, and then I'll open up to questions. This is a fourth generation mobile plant funded by the Department of Defense, and it uses the same kind of fuel, but it's only 1 megawatt or 5 megawatts, something that could run a base off of a truck for multiple numbers of years. I've heard everything from 2 years to 10 years on these things. And this one happens to be gas cooled. And again, it fits on a truck. Amazing. You know, maybe the generator would fit on another truck and some of the auxiliary equipment on another truck. One more one, Texas, Abilene Christian University is doing a molten salt reactor. There's a little picture of it on the right of what it's going to look like. And it's going to have the fuel dissolved in the salt itself. Again, lots of technical challenges, huge amount of promise for the future. And Sam Altman's involved. I don't have time to talk about these. I want to open up to questions. So carbon fuel dividend would have made nuclear cheaper than natural gas a long time ago. All right. Let me, I don't know. I don't need to stop the screen sharing, but I'd like to see you guys again.
Yeah, why don't you could do that. And if you all would go to at the bottom,
Should I stop sharing?
the React, and if you could raise your hand, and that would be a nice way to
Let me stop sharing.
go through the questions. So yeah, Larry, Howe, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for the presentation. I know we've talked before, but it's great to kind of see it all put together. The IRA, I think, has the technology neutral investment tax credit. So is that 30% effective tax credit? Is that helping a lot of these small modular?
It is. It's not helping the restarts so much. It's in there. It's right now. I would characterize. I belong to the American Nuclear Society, and I follow 3 daily newsletters. And right now, how much they're relying on the investment tax credits, that'd be the big one they're relying on. It varies depending on which company you're talking about, but everybody's nervous about it.
But I can't imagine that being
it's about what 30%. I can't remember the numbers.
It's 30% is usually
30%. Yeah, that's a big deal, and that's on the investment, and that's upfront, and the interest rates are a big deal too.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, next would be Jim Tucker.
Thank you for your well-illustrated presentation. I most everything that you've talked about has been utility scale, which for the coal replacement is going to have a way to move it around. I mean, we discovered with the mid-continent wind that you can generate a lot of things that you can't move around. And so that's going to be an issue. But progressively lowering the scale is really the direction things seem to be going, in the direction we need to go in terms of distributed generation. And maybe the small medium reactors will be more local, and maybe they'll address that. But it was still probably I think even if everything is fast tracked, a decade away from anything utility scale starting from the ground up, correct?
No, no, we're about 2030 for the first ones. The natrium reactor, that one's already, the other side is being built. The TVA ones are under construction also in Tennessee. Those are demonstration, but they will be electric. Yeah, you're close. Barring some unforeseen events, such as really long delays in funding or whatever, it's early 2030s. And once you start on these, like the GE CEO, I forget his name now, he's been on the news several times talking about, they go an assembly line on these. The modularity is such that you literally can build and ship the most expensive components as long as they're small modular reactors. So they can go really quick. The first one might take 5-6 years, but the next ones after that can be measured in months.
Including permitting and everything.
Well, the permitting is we're seeing big improvement already. Just the interactions going on privately between the developers and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. There's been a sea change, and that was the Advance Act. Basically, Congress wasn't quite reading the Riot Act, but there was two bills. One was under Trump several years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, and then the Advance Act was just last year. It basically said, NRC, rewrite your mission statement. This is your job to not to promote it, but not to stall it.
As a geologist, I'm concerned because everything I hear is we're still trying to handle the waste as unstabilized waste, and I think we need to make a lot of progress on that. One thing that does look like an opportunity, maybe because I don't know a lot about it, because it sounds good, is marine propulsion, because I've seen anything from 3 to 6% of the carbon contribution is from marine transport, so 3% is probably safe. And they burn really nasty bottom of the refinery stuff. And I don't know what the retrofit cycle is on propulsion or versus the new construction, but that seems like a segment that we can really focus on, and also maintain the policing on the new and the spent fuel so that it's not misused after initial use. So that seems like the real opportunity area. Appreciate any of your thoughts you have.
It is. Maersk, the biggest shipper, is studying it. And right now we have small modular reactors all over the place running the nuclear navy. And the technology isn't that different. It really isn't. And those can be built a lot quicker. And if anybody else is interested in the waste, the next set of slides covers that. There were so many misconceptions on waste. Off the top of my head, and I am somewhat expert on this. I had responsibilities for my previous company, and I was involved in the purchasing of dry cask storage from Holtec, the biggest in the world. Were you to take the actual waste component, the uranium oxide and everything generated after that in the pellet form, it would still fit on a football field about 20, 30 yards deep. It's that small. The amount of waste is, yes, it's heavy. You can look at tons. None of us are, especially me, I'm not capable of thinking in terms of tons and volume. I can think in terms of volume. the volume of nuclear waste is ridiculously small. It's stable. It's being stored in dry cask storage, and there are commercial operations going on in several places to say, give me your waste. It's a job machine. I'll watch it. And I could show you some spectacular slides about just how safe this stuff is. First of all, there's been no incidents with commercial reactor waste of any sort. And it's stored in, I'll go, let me screen share again. Can you guys see that? Are you seeing my screen still?
Yeah,
Yes.
you're good.
I'm going the wrong way. Yeah. This is what it looks like, dry cask storage. You can hug it, you can kiss it. You can hit it with a missile, you can hit it with a truck, and nothing's going to happen. I could show you a great movie of that. They literally have taken one of these things and hit it with a missile. And the missile destroys parts of the concrete, but the dry cask underneath it, steel portion underneath it, survives. All the waste would fit on a football field. What's the actual number I had here? What is it? 24 feet tall. And 32 times more waste per day from a coal plant. And that's hazardous slurry than we did in 45 years. And it's all paid for. $0.001 per kilowatt hour, 0.1 cents, up to 2013. That's 48 billion. It's worth a lot more now because of the interest that paid on it. It's all prepaid. We have consent-based siting. I don't have time to talk about that now. We could deep borehole it on the left. Finland's doing something similar with the tunnel on the right, and it's actually built. Canada has licensed a fuel repository site. Sweden is doing a similar form to Finland. It's kind of what we've done. And towns in Northwest Colorado want to do it, and their Indian tribes are involved in these type of things. They look at it as just pure jobs. And if you were to go down, we've been doing stuff like this already in New Mexico, in salt mines, geologically stable deep salt mines. These aren't exactly the same thing, but some of it is as nuclear waste. This is what it looks like right now at the waste isolation pilot plant. And all these blue areas are places we could do it. Those are the most stable geological formations on the planet. We're talking hundreds of millions of years, no water infiltration. And the amount of space we need is infinitesimal compared to the volume we have. So, sorry, let me try to unshare again. Sorry for my digression there. But
let's go to the next question. What car?
Yes, Tom, thank you very much for a great talk and excellent slides. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how nuclear power generation can be integrated with wind and solar. So my very basic, or is it actually a good match?
Oh yeah, it is right now.
So, okay, so my basic, I guess, conundrum, and this is like very much layperson, right, is that my understanding of nuclear is high capital costs, so you want to run the plants pretty much full.
Right.
But wind and solar are variable. So if you think about matching with gas on an economic basis, it kind of makes sense because gas, you're paying for the fuel. Fuel is very expensive. And so when you can ramp the gas plant down, you're saving money on fuel. Does it really make sense to ramp a nuclear plant down to run wind and solar?
Yeah. And those slides I showed quickly in the beginning, the two big studies in New York and California, they were what's called an integrated system analysis by the absolute strongest possible technical people in the world. Looking at, they know the day by day and minute by minute grid, and surprisingly, batteries work out well in that scenario to a small degree. And you know what helps keep the amount of batteries down is the nuclear right now. But the conclusion that they came up with was somewhere on the order of, I'm trying to do off the top of my head now, somewhere on the quarter of a quarter or less has to be firm power. You could probably get down to 20%, but that's still a lot, right? It's been a lot, and we don't have, and it has to be all over the grid, and that's that's a minimum you need. But you'll end up with more, like right now in the state of Illinois is 53% generation is nuclear. That's because we just built a lot of them and we kept them running. And the state of Illinois bailed them out twice with clean energy, with renewable energy credits, very, very modest, but with kickers in case natural gas price got cheap, that they have to give the money back. And the optimum is somewhere renewables somewhere south of 80%.
Right.
And it depends on where you are in the country, obviously. If you're in an area that has a huge amount of wind and you're allowed to go offshore wind is much more reliable capacity factor than onshore wind. But there are parts of our country, like in Iowa, parts of Kansas, where it's pretty darn reliable, but it's still not perfect. You can have the favorite counterexample is the Northwest Pacific. There are periods literally of 6 weeks where you got neither. You got like 3 to 5% capacity factors of wind and solar. They just both stink. Yeah, it's just too wet, too cloudy, and not windy. So it really depends on where you are. And I watch the California grid closely. It's called CAISO. You can go CAISO.com, CAISO. You can actually look at how much batteries on, how much nuclear is on, how much gas, how much everything. And the thing I had a great post in CCL about 3 years ago in the Nerd Corner saying, guess what's charging those batteries overnight? It's the nuclear unit. What they're using. It's all integrated. You integrate the whole thing. And when you do system-wide cost analyses, there's a slide I didn't include from Europe that shows how depending on how clean you're trying to get, how exponentially expensive it gets if you don't have firm power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. No, I need to look at that more closely. And it is very complicated unless you spend a ton of time on it because, like you say, it depends on where you are and what the demand looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, but most people, I call them well-intentioned because they are. Most well-intentioned groups like Sierra Club they buy the line, the wind and solar and batteries can do it all. And you look at my favorite Volts podcast, the same thing over and over and over again. And he's not telling a lie. He's just saying we need distributed generation. We need control of our battery sources, plugging cars in. We can displace all kinds of generation. Yes. You still need times. There are times where you still need more.
Okay, thank you.
Tom Mass, please.
Well, Tom, thank you very much. Your slides and your talk were both wonderful. I just wish everyone in the country could spend an hour on them and listening to you. I've been a big fan of small modular reactors for several years, and this is with having about 1,000% the knowledge that you do. I still feel very strongly about them. But one of the things that's appealed to me the most about them is that the components are small enough to be built in a plant.
Yeah.
And I've spent my time in manufacturing and product development and so forth. And that will put us on so much more of a reliable course to control our costs and schedules than we've had with these major power plants. It seems to me, my real question that I'm getting to is there a way we can really accelerate the rollout of SMRs?
Yeah.
We have a history in this country of doing these things very well if we make up our mind to. The COVID vaccine, in just a matter of months, we started from scratch and rolled that out. And the Panama Canal, the Manhattan Project, the building of LSTs and planes during World War II.
Tom, I think you guys might do it in Texas. I really do. You've got the regulatory framework in Texas to do it, and you've got Abilene is doing it. You've got the people in Austin. Yeah, I just listened to the Volts podcast about I think they're smart. I think they could see the benefit of the clean energy. You've got enough people there who understand we need to go clean. I think Tennessee can do it too. The TVA is big enough to push it. But right now, Department of Energy under Biden administration was all in. They were doing remarkable work, and they had. I'm hoping that the Chris Wright will continue that. He was on the board of the Oklo. That's the AI company, and they're building they're building their own reactor too. They want to do the waste. They want to do the recycling on site. They want to make generation and recycling of the nuclear. To talk about bleeding the fuel on site, and some of these newest designs with involving the salt and they're really designed to create fuel. They're designed to go the next step with thorium, and it's a whole new ball of wax. I don't have time to talk about now, but yeah, I think if the current administration picks up where the last one left off in Department of Energy, I think we can do it. They've done these reports, those green reports I showed you. They laid out pathways, what it takes. They talked about the funding, and they're realistic, and they realize that the first of a kind is not the same price as the nth of a kind. And that DOE has been putting money in there. They're putting in a huge amount to that sodium cooled one in Wyoming that Bill Gates is involved in, and they're doing a couple other ones. And they already helped fund one that is going to be built overseas. I forget which country, Romania or Poland. A small modular reactor from NuScale. It's licensed in America, but it's not sexy. I hate to use that word, but it's not. It took existing technology and said, okay, we're going to license a small modular reactor using everything we already know how to do, just make it smaller. And as a result, by not doing anything advanced in terms of enrichments of the fuel, pushing the technology towards longer cycles and cheaper fuel costs, they just said, no, we're just going to do it. We're going to use existing licensing bases, and we're going to get it licensed just to get it out there because we can build these in a factory and we can do it fast. And their contracts fell through, and they're in Wyoming and a couple other states in that area. Just because the cost was still uncertain, and that's already licensed. But people are going after the bigger, I call them the sexier ones, the more the 300 megawatt size, where you're talking about 4 of those can take the place of the full size. In fact, it's even better because you don't have to shut down the whole thing.
Well, thanks for the kind comments about Texas. I'll try to find a way to get involved.
They're doing it. Franz, Franz?
He's
yes,
in
yes,
the
oh,
queue.
yeah, I know Franz.
Yeah, he's pushing people in that direction.
Well, Texas A&M is putting in a major effort on SMRs.
Yeah.
All right, Larry. By the way, we've come to our time commitment, but obviously, if you want to leave, that's fine. But if you want to stick around, we'll continue the questions.
Yeah, I'm fine with time.
You're okay, Tom?
Oh yeah, whatever you want.
Okay, Larry Kramer.
Yeah, it was excellent slides and presentation. And I have 2 questions. One of them is about thorium reactors, and that's beyond the scope of this talk. And the other is about the levelized cost of energy for generation 2 reactors was real higher than coal plants. But I haven't seen anything about the SMRs.
I've got slides on that. You'll get the deck. You can go page through them at the end. The levelized cost, to be fair, no system planner uses it other than as one input, because levelized cost does not include the grid costs. Levelized cost is like isolating and said, I don't care. I mean, levelized cost, you got levelized cost of solar is infinitesimal, but it's got massive grid costs. When you start talking, if every single one of them had to be hooked up to the grid one at a time, you've got transformers and lines going everywhere, unless you do it distributed through the houses. And then you've got the storage problem. So levelized cost for system planners, they don't use it. And levelized cost of existing nuclear plants is you have to start looking at being paid for over a period of 10, 20, 30 years, and they're all paid for now. So these plants are still making electricity for the same. They're very competitive with natural gas right now, but natural gas can still become cheaper with fracking. In fact, nuclear was blowing the doors off of everybody until fracking took off about 10, 15 years ago. But yeah, levelized cost and then thorium, the 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 cost of nuclear in terms of kilowatts per the amount of generation needed can be competitive with other forms of firm generation. And like I said, I got some DOE slides in there in the deck, which you can have access to. So we can get competitive with similar power, but you cannot compare levelized cost of firm generation with levelized cost of variable generation. It's meaningless. It's done all the time by the renewable crowd who want to say you don't need wind, solar, coal, natural gas. The thorium question is it really boils down to two major issues that Abilene University, that TCU is working on right now when they build their molten salt reactor. Is thorium has a lot of promise. It's more plentiful than uranium. It's harder to deal with than uranium. We don't have the experience with it that we do with uranium. It breeds nicely into uranium-233. So a small amount of thorium ends up with creating a lot of new fuel. It's great. But its biggest problems right now, it kind of needs to be done in the most economical way would be in these molten salt reactors. You'll find a lot of other people on the internet touting the benefits of it. It's the combination of salt, neutrons, and stainless steel and modest pressures or no pressures over time has to be studied. These vessels have to stand up to whatever's going on. You're going to have chemical attack of the stainless steel that you're dealing with, and you're going to have fission products created in a soup, chemical soup, and those fission products have to be able to be isolated, separated in a salt environment under incredible radiation environment. That's all the stuff that's the biggest factors affecting thorium. I'm not saying we can't do it. You can do thorium the other way around in the TRISO fuel or in conventional fuel, like in pellets and rods, and that's being done now. But to make a thorium reactor work, you have to first start off with a uranium-235 reactor because thorium is not fissile. Thorium-232 is not fissile. It will split, but not you won't get enough neutrons out of it to do any good. It will not sustain a chain reaction, but it will transmute in a nuclear reactor into U-233, which is just about as good as U-235. It does not exist in nature. U-233 does not exist in nature, but it would exist in a thorium reactor. And the best economics and the best neutronics, the best way to make these is in the soup type reactor or in a reactor very cleverly designed as a combination of U-235 and thorium. And all the big challenges remaining for either type of reactor is just to do it. And if you use a conventional style reactor right now, the economics will tell you, yeah, you can do it really a lot quicker. You don't need to do as much research on thorium, but what you would end up with is a more expensive reactor at first because you have to have both uranium. You need a lot of uranium and a lot of thorium to start, and it's cheaper just to go with uranium right now. And you'll see people out there telling you that we're going to run out of uranium. Don't believe it. You'll see them on CCL. Don't believe it. We've got technology now that can pull it out of seawater, and it's almost indefinite amount. And yes, we can breed it into plutonium. And when you start talking about breeding, now you start talking about 2 orders or 3 orders of magnitude more fuel than you start with. So, great questions.
All right. Fresh off the plane from Argentina.
Wow.
Hey, thank you. Well, I mean, Tom, it's just amazing what you did. I'm so glad we got you on cocktails and conversations. I have two comments. One is someone, I forgot who it was, asked about shipping, and I put a link in the chat to something I saw on small reactors that would be floating reactors, so you may want to take a look at that. The second one is if you have an interest in nuclear energy beyond what CCL offers, join Generation Atomic. They are a great organization. There's a lot of overlap between what they do, but more specific to nuclear, of course, than CCL. But they advocate, educate, terrific organization.
Yeah, thanks, Franz. And Franz, shout out to you for bringing me into for getting me started on this second time around. I originally got started by getting asked to help with the Advance Act with some conservative senators, and I was thrilled to do that. And it was a love fest for the senators from Kentucky and West Virginia on nuclear. It was a nuclear love fest.
And just I've been putting in the chat about our, I'm not going to continue on after this to kind of talk about the next month, but we do have a speaker, Dr. Megan Wolf. She's a subject matter expert on plastics, and she's going to go into microplastics. And I've seen that she actually gave a presentation to the CCL's Health Action Team that was really good. So I'm looking forward to her next month. So just save the date. It's going to be March 22nd.
Can you keep me on your list?
I will. I will remember to do that.
Yeah,
yes.
that was awesome. That's one that I tell you, I worry about two things for my grandchildren.
Yeah.
The two biggest ones are climate change and plastics.
Well, it's somewhat depressing, but she does have an uplifting message. So I'll just, that's my tease for next month.
Great.
Okay. Robin, you're next.
Hi. Yes. Great talk. Thank you so much, Tom. Yeah, my husband and I are very interested in this new nuclear technology, but also I'm really interested in geothermal electric. And I'm just wondering, especially the enhanced hot rock geothermal. And I'm just wondering, I've got a couple questions on, I don't know if you know the answer, but how does the potential generation capacity compare with electric geothermal to the new nuclear? And also, how do the commercial timelines compare between the two?
Yeah, and I when I first made this talk, I did a slightly deeper dive than I normally would have in the geothermal, and you guys, you need to Google DOE liftoff reports on geothermal. They compare both of them. My recollection is that they have every form of energy generation as what it would take to get it to be scale we need in this country to go like 2050 net zero type of scale. Geothermal was behind nuclear. All right. And the reasons being, the best I can tell is, and the way I look at it is, nuclear has proven itself at scale in the old technology, and then the next version of technology is incremental. It's incremental, it's not earth-shaking. Geothermal, nobody has run a deep field geothermal ever. They're building them now. You're talking about fracking to thousands of feet, several thousand feet. And fracking, you've got people in this country that will say, you're not going to frack in my county. You're not going to frack in my backyard. And some of them have good reasons, seismic issues, and then all the water and the proprietary nature of whatever the chemicals are going in there. But let's just say we solve all that, and waste-wise, it's way better than coal and comparable to nuclear or anything else we got. You got to prove the concept. Is it, will you really get steam for the amount of time you think you will? Is it going to have, you have to cycle it, you have to baby it. Will these tunnels collapse? Will they change nature? Will something else happen to it? So it's really it reminds me of where nuclear power was in 1965. Hopefully, because the fracking industry is so advanced, I think we know more now, but we don't know what happens over periods of months and years when we shove water down and take steam out the other end. You're talking about two tunnels, too, side by side, 100 feet apart, and connected. That's crazy, but they do it. They can do it. It's a great question, and yeah, and I'm firmly in the all of the above camp. If you can take natural gas out of the ground right there and burn it right there and put the other stuff right back in the ground, I don't have a problem with natural gas. The problem I got with natural gas is nobody's doing that. We're putting the CO2. We talk about putting it in the ground, but we don't.
Okay. Well, it looks like we've exhausted questions unless there's any others. And Tom, impressively, you kept 19 people on for after 15 minutes after the scheduled presentation. The downside is that we didn't get to do our
Sorry about that.
that's okay, because that just means that our crack expert in putting these questions together, Dr. Barry, doesn't have to do anything for next month, and CCL saves $10 this month, so it's a win-win.
Let me also shout out to the rest of you that aren't part of the normal group in this. If you want to see this again, or a little more time to go into it, I'll do it again. I did update quite a bit from my first time around, and I am preparing a deeper dive on SMR technology for the Michigan men's group. They were the ones the second time around on this. The first time around was the Great Lakes Region conference in Rockford, and I got through that in person. It's much more fun in person.
Yeah. Well, we certainly thank you for your time and for your very excellent presentation. It was extremely well done, and I did record it. At least I hope everything went to my machine. Regrettably, last month was because of the transition into the new group leaders and everything, or not group leaders, but into the new structure of CCL. I didn't get the recording of the previous presentations that were on some of the coral reef information that's coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. So I didn't get but this one I will get out, and others can look at this afterwards. And so I'll create a YouTube video that you'll all be able to access. So just give me a week, or maybe a week, probably less than a week, to put that together, and we'll get it out on CCL onto the, let me see where that's going. It's going to be the Third Coast, even though there is no Third Coast anymore, but it's going to be on the Third Coast, and you can share with others. So
I did it again. Sorry.
any other questions or any other comments before we sign off?
Thanks for providing the whole deck. I mean, if you could copy the whole deck, he's got another 100 slides there. So,
are you going to send that to Robert, to Roger?
It's in the chat, Larry.
It's in the chat.
Okay.
And so if you capture the chat, you can get all the 100.
I'll save. I will save the chat and put that with the video whenever I get that out as a YouTube video in a few days. Give me a half a week. I've got some other things going on, but thanks everybody. And next month, please stick around or come back. I think it's going to be another really good presentation. Let me see. Dr. Megan Wolf is a subject matter expert on plastics. She's a frequent public speaker and a visiting faculty member at Bennington College. There's actually a course she's providing. I think it's free. A course she's providing on microplastics, and it's fascinating how much our lives have changed since I was a child to today in terms of microplastics. And I actually sent her presentation to my daughters because I said, you need to understand what's going on with microplastics with my grandchildren. So it's another really great presentation coming up. Save the date, March 22nd. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're not going to get to Dr. Barry's climate Q&A, but he's on sabbatical now. We're giving him a break from his incredibly intensive life of putting together questions for the Q&A. But no, Barry always does a great job, but he's okay with it. I told him, I said, I don't think we're going to get to it this week, but maybe next month. You never know.
So you better study.
Yeah, that's right. Read the New York Times. I think that's where he gets most of his questions from. And plus,
Houston Chronicle.
Our Houston Chronicle and our Facebook page at CCL North. What is it now? We're North. We're the Woodlands, North Texas, North Houston. Excuse me. So thanks everybody. Thanks
again, Roger.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.